Welcome to Yeukai Business Show, UK's premier business show where we feature business thought leaders, high achievers, and industry experts. Today's episode is brought to you by World Outsourcing Solutions Limited, a company that specializes in helping executive business owners with virtual assistant services and business growth systems. Here's your host.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. It's Trevor Stockwell here with you today. On this episode, I'm also joined by Elena. Now, Elena is a skilled trainer and talent development specialist, as well as being a writer. So Elena founded an education platform to prepare youth for the future, which is called Bloom Youth, and also co-founded Besson, which is a training company, and it combines brain science, technology, and coaching to increase both productivity and well-being within organizations. So welcome, Elena Agar.
Thank you so much. Good to be here.
Great to have the opportunity to chat with you and find out more about what you're doing. You're certainly changing the way people learn in a positive way, which is always good. Maybe just to start off with, because your background is more education, isn't it? Which then helps prepare you for where you are now and what you're doing. A little bit of your journey that's brought you to where you are.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I kind of came up in the world of higher education and learning, really working in different organizations, institutions around the world. In 2014, I made the move from the US to the UAE, Dubai, where I've shifted more towards kind of working with executives in organizations and then ultimately going into corporate learning. And then a couple of years back, this is where we founded Besson, and it's an ed tech platform, in fact. So parts of what we do is aligned with sort of the new way of training people and transforming organizations. But essentially, we're an ed tech platform where we create opportunities for individuals to thrive using the research we know from neuroscience and combining technology as well. So it was, for me, I always say it was a hobby that turned into a career and then a business. So I consider myself very fortunate and privileged to do what I do today.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So did you move to the UAE for the business opportunity, or was that almost like a side element to it?
To be honest, no. So I moved for personal reasons, and then having lived in the country for a couple of years, and I think that's what a lot of people say. Like, we're going to go to Dubai for a couple of years, and we're going to stay, and then we're going to go back. And then a couple of years turned into 7 years now, going on to 8. So UAE being a place where they are, granted the fact that they're less than 50 years old, they are really great at providing opportunities for anybody who's looking to do something, particularly within the business space or anything that's kind of innovative and interesting that can add value to the population of the UAE and the region. So it provides a lot of opportunities for startups, for entrepreneurs to really find their space there. And so so I came there for different reasons, but I stayed for that. I stayed because of the access and the support you get from the UAE government to actually make a change, and it being still a smaller market, you were able to make very impactful, quick kind of small wins along the way versus large markets like the US or Europe, for example.
Yeah. Okay. No, that sounds really good. So one of the things I think we're both aware of the struggle is the old mindset with regards to traditional training and sort of how elements of that maybe work better than others. What would you say are some of the sort of strategies that you guys have adopted and you implement that would be different to the old way of doing things?
Sure. So let's just refresh of what does the old way look like, right, from any organization. So the old way of training is, particularly if we talk about soft skills, right? So, and this is kind of the area that we specialize in. So when it comes to soft skills, the typical approach is let's put 20 to 25 people in a room for 6 to 8 hours, maybe 2-3 days, sometimes 5 days, right? We throw them in some nice venues. We give them some nice lunches. We get a trainer that is popular. And we feel like we've ticked the box. But at the end of the day, people walk away. They retain 7% of what they learned after just 1 week. Right. And then that's the best case scenario. So you've just spent a lot of money. You wasted a lot of your people's times and your time essentially. And no knowledge was transferred essentially. Right. So, and sure, the participants were happy because you get out of the office a little bit, you do something different. And that seems to be the whole point of training as far as the way it is right now, right? And of course we know there's something wrong with it. So a lot of the L&D and HR individuals we speak to, many people know. But the thing is that I think because we've been doing it the same way for such a long time, kind of like with the whole education system, right? Also, it's because we've been doing it the same way, and it's almost like it's so difficult to make that change to the new way of learning, which I'll touch base on in a minute. But so let's just get just to be very realistic, it doesn't work. This 68 hours, people don't retain. It's a waste of time and a waste of money. And one silver lining of the pandemic, if anything, is that organizations have realized that a lot of things that we used to do are just not sustainable moving forward, and that you're simply going to be left behind. And when we're talking about, just looking at what the future of work is going to look like. So by 2025, right? So if you look at World Economic Forum or Deloitte reports, by 2025, 1 in 2 employees are going to need reskilling and upskilling, right? So if you and not just that, and in addition to that, in the next 5 years, about 85 million, if I'm not mistaken, 85 million jobs are going to be completely just non-existent. But on the flip side, 97 million of jobs are going to be created that are required to have new skill sets. So as an organization, when I'm talking about upskilling and training my staff for the future, if I still do the same approach of 6 to 8 hours, people walk away, they learn nothing, where is that going to leave me as an organization, right? Or as an individual? So there's two responsible parties here. So this old approach is definitely not going to work. So if that's the future, what we're predicting in the next 5 years, if that's what it looks like, we need to start thinking about how we're actually able to help people learn how to learn. How can we help people create processes and learn in a way that sticks to them? Not 20, 25 people in the room and expect everybody to learn on the same level, the same way, etc. But how can we actually individualize learning? I'll pause here and then I can speak a bit more on the actual how.
No, it's really good. The only other thing at this point I would just add into the mix really is the balance of individual performance and the well-being side of it. And I think you've touched on more that if it's more remote and we're not locked in a training classroom for a few days on end, looking forward to lunch and looking forward to the tea breaks above everything else, it's a lot more, it's better for our well-being, isn't it, as an individual in how we learn stuff. But how does the brain science feed into how you then roll out training?
Sure. So change is difficult in general for people, right? And change is difficult not because people are not motivated to do something, not because they're not excited about something. It's just simply because the motivation by itself doesn't work. And we know from various researchers, from BJ Fogg to James Clear to many others that are publishing a lot of work around these topics of helping people actually create micro actions to help them change the behavior. So when it comes to soft skills, upskilling, right, retraining somebody, or even unlearning something else, it's all about what is it that you do day in and day out, right? And it's more about consistency and these incremental progresses each day versus intense kind of that let's put you in a room for 2 days and expect you that you're going to suck in on this knowledge and then you're going to be able to implement it. It's not the case, because in order for people to actually implement the knowledge, they need to create a process to implement this new knowledge into their everyday until that new knowledge becomes a new behavior, a habit, a routine. And that is how change happens, because our brains are simply not made to experience change and not that they're not made to experience change, it's a threat, right? So we go into that fight or flight mode essentially, and any change is a threat to our brain as far as the science is concerned. Yeah. So this is where we need to really look at how can we help individuals create specific processes that work for them. And for different people, it's going to look very differently, which is why the future of learning is individual. And so as we and an important point you mentioned about the well-being, right? So another thing that we need to consider as organizations and as leaders is that if our staff are stressed out on the verge of burnout, they're definitely not learning, they're not performing, and your organization is basically dependent on your workforce. So if your workforce is underperforming because they're struggling with various mental well-being aspects, how are you expecting to grow? So, and this is where, again, those micro actions help, because it's about individualized approach. And final part here is this is where the coaching comes in, the live support. A person, you cannot just put somebody through an online course. So a lot of the LMS systems, the learning management systems that are applied across many organizations, people are just kind of clicking through. Sometimes people need to have that conversation. So this is where, like in our case and so many other organizations that are kind of innovative in this space, is looking at it and saying it's not enough to just give the knowledge. Well, people need support. They need human support. They need that soundboard. They need somebody to kind of guide them through some of the obstacles they may face when they are learning something new. So that's what I would have to say about that.
Yeah. No, that's really good. So does it follow like the 70-20-10 model more? 70% hands-on day job, then more 20% is you're learning from peers and experts around you, or maybe some of the learning experience platforms, things like that. And then maybe 10% is more we're in a classroom or we're doing an online course. Or does your way differ from sort of that model? I know it's only one model, but how does that fit with that?
Yeah, so I think there's so many models, as you mentioned. There's so many models that exist in terms of how an organization can implement this. In our case, we're focused more on this incremental change and really on individual level. So it's really just about helping an individual create a process that works for them. And those percentages may vary, because sometimes, yes, it's actually being on the job and around other people. But what about well-being resources? That's not always going to be kind of applicable in certain case scenarios. So it's essentially just helping people identify where they are, where do they want to be, and helping them create a pathway of how to get there with daily micro actions that ultimately add up. And when I'm talking about micro, I'm talking really tiny, like 5 to 10 minutes each day of implementing a new habit, a new routine, a new behavior that will help them thrive in their careers. And that just depends, or their lives essentially. And that depends, of course, on the topics at hand. So if we're just talking about soft skills development, right? And it's where the organization comes in, I guess, here is provide people the opportunity. So if we're taking that 70% kind of on the job learning is wonderful as a platform. We come in and we kind of create those sort of opportunities for them to learn. But an organization needs to also have that support where people are not expected to have huge changes in short periods of time, where people have the time and the safety to be able to implement and innovate and experiment the things that they're learning, right? So whether soft skills or just in terms of just being creative or innovative, right? Because if that knowledge is not applied, then what's the point of it all? What's the ROI of all these billions of dollars that companies are spending globally every year on training and development?
Yeah, it's like I've got a certificate, I put it on the CV, nothing else has changed, really, isn't it? That's the danger. So from a business perspective then, we have listeners, business owners from all different sort of sizes, different countries. The location, to a large extent, I think is irrelevant. I think it's the general culture and the mindset of the individual organisations that really help or hinder personal development, learning and development within the workspace, big teams, small teams, whatever. What can businesses do better to help foster that culture of kind of tailored learning, as you mentioned? Is it more we give you X amount of hours to fit in your plan around your responsibilities? Or what are the sort of things that they can do to help support things?
Sure. So, I mean, listen, at the end of the day, business is around, making money, right? It's about business growth or, reducing costs essentially. So, and that's understandable. But I think, it's very important to understand kind of where your organization is headed and just staying on top of what is the future skill set is going to require from your employees, right? So first of all, we need to audit where we are right now as an organization, where, kind of test or measure the pulse and what's happening within the company, within the culture. I was actually, the company culture, I was actually talking to somebody earlier today about the impact of company culture on well-being, right? So we are, it's one of those things that we're all feeling it. That's what we're talking about earlier. We're all feeling this tension, particularly now that we're kind of going into this new way of working, we're all feeling this tension about being overwhelmed. And, there's that fear. People are working more than they did prior to 2020 because they're afraid to lose their jobs, right? And we're saying, well, let's just throw some yoga classes, let's give them some meditation access app, etc. And the organizations are making it individual problem that these people are not, that their people are not able to cope with the challenging world of business. But then maybe it's the company culture. Right? So this is where we have to recognize as leadership. So again, looking at kind of measuring the pulse of your organization, saying, as a leader, are you really practicing and supporting giving people opportunities to learn at their own pace, to learn at the way that they best learn? Are you really creating opportunities for them to take that day and do something they enjoy, like a passion project, right? Like that's what a lot of companies are doing now. Like just let's give them a month and do something passionate, but it makes a huge impact. Another thing to consider is, as a leader of an organization, are you leading by example, when it comes to managing your well-being? And well-being is essential. And the reason it's such an essential part is actually it's one of the top skills required for success in the future career in the next 5 years. And that has never been the case. Resilience, stress management, self-management are top skills required by some of the kind of biggest reports out there, right? That has never been the case in previous years in the world of work. So what does that tell us is that mental well-being, being able to self-manage, be resilient are important. So as an organization, as a leader, are you practicing these things? Are you setting an example for people to be able to follow you essentially? Or are you sending emails at 1 a.m. and further enhancing the stress and the anxiety of your individuals? Because what happens when you do that is your employees are going to be like, do I need to be online at 1 a.m.? Right? Is that's the expectation that you're almost by default creating in your organization. So I think it starts from the top up, not to spend more on this, but definitely from the top up, understanding, are your people overworking? Are they afraid to speak up? Or is there quite a transparency in your organizations? So is the psychological safety there? Are people able to say, listen, I need a day, I need a day off, or etc. And are people taking their vacation days? That's as simple as that, right? So, and I guess the final 2 points of the way to really recognize that is, just looking at topics around presentism and leavism. Presentism is when, people are, maybe they're there, but they're not really producing anything. They're just kind of there, it's butts in the seats, and they're logged in, but they're not really performing. They're not really producing as they should, right? So that should indicate to you as a leader that, okay, well, if people are working so many hours and they're exhausted, yet the production of the company is not growing, there's something there. And it's not just performance, there's an underlying factor. So it's important not to stick a Band-Aid on a broken leg, which is what we do most of the time. And then leavism, people are not disconnecting. So if you have employees that are sending you emails at 10 p.m. at night, you should recognize that as a red flag, and vice versa, right? Stop sending emails as a leader after a certain hours, right? Schedule them if you must. But these are small things to, again, test the pulse, the temperature of your organization in terms of where's your team when it comes to just mental well-being, for starters.
Yeah, no, that's really good. Several barriers there that I know it's all too common. And I think part of the issue is, as leaders, we don't necessarily take the time to stop and think, what is it that my team think I expect of them? I think there's a lot of assumptions both ways. And I think the fact that if we don't actually communicate it, like, you have to tell people what you want them to know. Otherwise, they'll assume, they'll fill in the blanks with whatever, their perspective, what they heard somebody else say about this scenario, about what you expect and the targets and whatever else. I think communication is huge. You're right.
Yeah, and actually to add to that point, so one way to also test that and to prevent this from happening is to have continuous conversations, so regular check-ins with your team members. So if the largest of organizations can manage to do that with hundreds of thousands of employees around the world, I think many of us can really do that. So really checking in with your teams, and particularly this is important as for those that are still working remotely and planning to do so, which majority of us are, at least on some percentage basis. But checking in regularly with each individual team member that you're working with directly, and encouraging your management as well to check in with their team members, which means that you as a senior leader need to check in with your managers and vice versa. So it's a trickle down effect, right? So it all starts with the leader. So if you as a leader is not making time, you're probably missing out on a lot of opportunities, because if you're not making time, then your managers here are very unlikely to make time. Some maybe. And then that goes down to your bottom line. And then you have a whole organization that is simply not in tune and not communicating and not aligned. And in the future of work, where especially now, as we're kind of going into the more positive years of our businesses and economies, people are going to be looking for career change. I think statistically they're saying like 1/3 of individuals that are going to be looking to change their careers. And with vast of opportunities now available because of fully remote work, there's more opportunities. So retention is going to be a problem for many organizations. I foresee it because of that culture piece. So
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Would you say then, because I know part of your focus is in sort of developing the youth and raising them with the right skills initially before or as they go into the workforce. From a learning perspective, yes, there are differences as we get older. We learn slightly differently. Maybe it takes longer to put things into practice and to grasp things. But are there many other differences that you're aware of between sort of how the guys that go through your youth program approach learning maybe, or utilize it better, that maybe people that have been around long enough to have had a lot of the old way of thinking, but they want to embrace the new way? What are some of the things that they could maybe learn quickly from the younger generation that are just adopting it as that's the norm?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Actually, one of the reasons we kind of opened up the world for higher education in our work, why we kind of went into it is because we realized that a lot of the changes we're looking to kind of help organizations with really need to start earlier on. So really bridging that gap between what education provides, which is a lot of good things, but also they're lacking some areas, right, to what the world of work needs. And you're absolutely right. So generations, I mean, Gen Z, so those that are born before 2000, right, they sort of grow up with technology, right? But then you have Generation Alpha, which are born after 2000. So those are now that are entering college, maybe soon to be graduating. So these two generations are different compared to previous ones. In one, they grew up with that technology, so everything is very fast paced. They know how to find information, so their attention span, everybody's attention span is just a little bit less. So how do you help them actually create impactful, quick micro learning, micro things, right, in their day to help them learn? That's one thing. But one thing, another important factor that organizations need to consider is that these generations, and particularly Alpha generation, they're not really interested in money as much as we think they are. So previous, like Gen Z also money was kind of on the, to kind of number 3 or 5 on their list of things they look for. But purpose was very important. Mm-hmm. So when we're talking about learning, we also talk about what is the motivation for people to learn. So if you're bringing in young generations into your company, the first thing you need to focus on is the purpose, meaning aligning what is it that they want to accomplish as an individual with the organizational goals. Because for them, it's going to be very important to be aligned with these two. And again, because of the vast of opportunities that are available, and also because of the gig economy that's been booming and it's going to keep booming and booming, and the world of entrepreneurship. So you want to keep these young individuals, you need to keep them engaged on a level that speaks to them. Meaning that they're gonna care less about money, so that's not as important to them anymore. Of course, it still is for many. Don't get me wrong, but majority are not gonna have this as their top need. Yeah. But what if the top needs are? Am I aligned with the purpose of the company? Do I care about what is it that they're creating and producing into this world? Another thing they're gonna care about is what opportunities are there for me to be mentored, to be coached, right? Because they need that support. So, and in the old way of working, you kind of just throw the person in, maybe you go through some kind of onboarding. Majority of onboarding processes are lacking big time, right? So let's just look at the onboarding piece altogether. That's a whole different conversation though. So if I was an organization, I would focus on, are we aligning? Are we having these conversations and making sure that they're aligned with, what they want to do, where we want to be as an organization? Are we providing support, mentorship, coaching for them as well throughout their journeys, instead of just kind of expecting them to find their own way? And finally, just looking at opportunities to create an amazing onboarding program for these young people, because that's what's lacking. And we just keep doing things the same way over and over again, and we expect something different to come out, and it's just not going to work long term. Or even short term, to be fair. So it's a lot of organizations are going to find themselves in difficult situations unless they start redesigning how they approach just their workforce in general.
Yeah. And I guess part of the keeping the ongoing engagement is whenever you have the reviews, if you don't do it more often than the quarterly reviews, however often you have your reviews, it's keeping that, has anything changed? So the culture perspective is more, is there that dialogue where they feel safe to raise issues? I'm not particularly happy here. I like the company, but blah, blah, blah. Or is it that I just need to say what I think you need to hear, so we get through it and I'll go and look for another job in the interim? It's like, it's just not helpful, is it, from a company perspective, to not have a constant open ear? It doesn't mean that, the company has to follow everything that the employees want, but you're right. It's the balance of keeping them engaged, because they're motivated for different reasons a lot of the time. And if you're not able to do that as a company, there's plenty of others out there that will. And you lose, as you say, the talent.
Absolutely.
When you don't want to. It comes back to, fundamentally, it comes back to keeping the value on the individual as an individual. Yes, they contribute to the bigger picture of how the organization flows, but it's valuing the person for who they are. And then, like you say, giving them that space that maybe there's a chapter in their life where they need different demands, they need different support, and can they air that with you? And is there a way that you can work with them? Have they even thought that that's possible? And it comes back to communication, doesn't it? So, yeah.
And also, I think important to note here is that it's not all on the organization as well. So I think, because there's we like to pick on organizations, and being in the space that we are as a startup, we like to poke at them, but realistically, there's also the individual responsibility. So as an individual, as an employee, what are you doing to make sure you're communicating your concerns, right? To speaking up. Right. Of course, it's, in this case, there's two sides to the story. So if you feel that it's safe to speak up, but also we need to have the courage to have these conversations as well as individuals, right? So, and also as an individual, how are you making sure you're up to date on what's happening in the world of work? An organization can support, but oftentimes we don't even ask, and we expect things to kind of come to us. But maybe just also let's work together with our leadership, with our HR departments and L&D, and saying, listen, I would really love to take part in this. And as an individual also, as the world of work is shifting, and we've seen this a lot of companies went through restructuring, a lot of job roles were changed as a result of what has happened. So as an individual, how quickly are you able to pivot into another area of work? Meaning, are you very specialized? Or is there space for you to be a little bit more flexible and kind of stay up to date and have other skill sets, so that you make it easier for your organizations to not just to not have to let you go because you don't fit into, but saying, actually, I can do X, Y, and Z, not only A, right? So looking at diversifying your skill set, and again, working together with the company, because realistically, as a company, it's hard to find talent. It's hard to find good talent, right? And it's costs a lot of money for companies to hire and fire people. So if you're able to help them and say, listen, I know that this position is no longer, is no longer there because of various reasons or automation or whatever, but I have this other set of skills that I think will be great in this department, and making yourself present and making yourself seen. And that's what you can do as an individual. And then, that's being proactive in general. So as an individual, we also have responsibilities.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And it's thinking further that, okay, how can I make the business case that it's beneficial to them as well as me if I start learning this or develop in this area? Or is it just, I'd really like to do that, and I'd like you to pay for it. It's that sort of, it should be a team, shouldn't it? A lot of the time, neither side approaches it as well as they should, I think. Not that I'm a judge and jury on it, but there should be a lot more collaboration. And I think if there's equal respect and value, that's more likely to happen. If that's not fostered, you're just, you're complicating things. You're putting barriers there that don't need to be there, really, aren't you?
Absolutely.
This is really good. I could talk to you for hours. We are close to kind of wrapping up this episode, but tell us just a little bit more about some of the different content. You mentioned that you focus on a lot of the soft skills, some of the different courses that you guys provide.
Sure. So we provide courses for individuals and organization and individuals in organization, in fact, really future focused on what are the top skills that are needed. So some of the things that I've mentioned, that self-management piece, that resilience building. And for us, we're almost there as facilitators to help you create a process. So we're pass on the methodology that we've learned and the different, and the approach, that micro habit creation approach, right? Using technology and what we know from neuroscience and kind of educating you and then helping you create a process that works for you. So critical thinking, innovation, right? Emotional intelligence, working with the team, just different leadership transformation programs. So those top skills, and this is kind of, we're always reinventing ourselves in this way because the world is continuously changing, right? So, and that's the beauty of being in this very agile, lean startup world, is that that's the capacity that we have to say, the decision are made very quickly and say, okay, you know what, this is how the world is changing. So we try to adjust the content on the latest trends of what's happening and what individuals are really going to need. And this is where we use the tools, which is the tech. So it's an application that we use to help individuals create these experiences for themselves where they're nudged almost on daily basis to implement these small kind of micro actions to help them learn. So it's a combination between kind of live versus self-guided learning. And then on top of that, they have access to a coach anytime, anywhere, whenever they feel stuck. So our focus is the soft skills needed for the future. And mental well-being is a big focus of ours. So helping create mindset for growth, and starting with youth all the way to senior executives.
Yeah, no, that sounds really good. It sounds very comprehensive. The element of the coaching then, when you say as and when they need the support, so is there not like set milestones that when you get X away through, we'll then have a catch up to see how you're implementing it, or is that not so much the focus?
It depends, of course, on the programs. So it depends on the client needs. It depends on the cohort that goes through our programs. So, but because of technology, we're able to provide access at a time that is convenient for the individual. And sometimes it doesn't need to be that 10-session coaching experience, right? Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's just that conversation. So the whole idea is to provide support when they need it, at the time that they need it, not to wait for that scheduled opportunity.
Yeah.
It could be that as well, of course. So it's more of just making it accessible. So making learning accessible. So if you're learning something, you feel stuck on a particular area, you have that support right then and there. And again, technology makes it affordable, and it makes it affordable for organizations and accessible for employees, no matter what part of the world that they're in.
Yeah, absolutely. Sounds amazing. It really does. Well done. Thank you for bringing that to the marketplace and to individuals. There's definitely a need for it. So certainly wish you well with all your endeavours going forward. Hopefully we'll chat again at some point. Maybe you'll come back and elaborate even more on this, because it's one of my favourite subjects. But I appreciate the time you've given to us today. Hopefully it's got a lot of the listeners thinking about, if I'm leading staff, how can I be more flexible, be more open to them? And if we're more on the side of, okay, I'm part of a team, how can I contribute in a healthy way, communicate my needs, but also value and understand the needs of the organizations and how they work together. And maybe be proactive ourselves, as you say, more with our own learning journey. Whether work funds it, whether we do it ourselves, it's something we can offer the organizations anyway. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Elena. We do need to wrap it up for now, but I really appreciate your time. I've learned some stuff and I've enjoyed chatting to you, and I'm sure that you have as well. So thank you very much.
Pleasure.
For everybody listening, thanks for joining us, and we will catch you next time. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to Yeukai Business Show. We will be back to bring you more episodes with success stories and advice straight from the experts. Want more? Check out www.yeukai.businessshow.com. Get your free trial of our virtual assistant service today. Just visit www.worldoutsourcingsolutions.com. Quote WOS18 or send us an email at support@worldoutsourcingsolutions.com.